people who right. So I think we're good to go. I'm gonna leave the screen like this because I want to be able to see people's names and call on you and that type of stuff. Um, but we're gonna start by looking. Is this big enough, guys? Can you see the PowerPoint? Yes, no, maybe.
Tough now.
Yeah, clear
Yep.
enough. All right, so we're going to be looking at part of the preface on chapter one and some other elements that were useful at the beginning or is useful at the beginning of this. So first off, from the course description, picking up some things that we need to share. So of course, this is not the end of all leadership studies. This is primarily an introductory course into leadership ethics and governance. So understand that we may not go into the kind of depth that other programs might go into. Its focus, based upon the model that we're looking at, is going to be based upon your own personal experience and personal development. So it's gonna focus heavily on your own self-discovery and self-realization. So there's a lot of reflective analysis required for this class. A lot of self-analysis is going to be required for the way this course is done. As per some of the assignments that you've seen, we're going to be looking at developing your own personal attitudes towards leadership, and we're going to be looking at evaluating and examining your value systems, which in other words means we're going to be looking at your ethical values, and we're also going to be looking at developing your better understanding of ethical decision making as part of the tools that you're going to be getting into this getting in the course. All right. So, um, so there's a fair amount of things that we want to be able to do. The objectives of the course, well, we're going to look at the various theories of leadership, which some of you all spoke about. We're going to be looking at the various tools of ethical decision. One particular model that we're going to be looking at, and we're going to kind of do some retrospective analysis of decisions that you've made that when you've been confronted with a dilemma situation. One of the assignments is to also for you to create a plan to move forward. It's the reflections and leadership action plan. So we want to be able to do that as well. We are going to be using teams and groups in this course. So obviously this course is also going to focus some attention on team development and understanding how groups work with emphasis on practical applications. We're going to be looking at current issues that face us um, as individuals in our society and with the leadership that is around us or the leadership that is displayed. We're going to be looking at contemporary issues there. And this last one here is that at the end of the course, this is one of its more lofty goals. We're going to try to see if you can display modified behaviors indicative of the development of a personal philosophy of positive leadership and ethical values. So let's examine this particular outcome a little bit because it's something that I want to make sure that we understand what's happening here. So, Christian, have you ever come across behavior modification in the past?
No, sir, I have not.
You sure?
No, sir.
How? Okay. So, when you were doing the wrong things in life when you were growing up, how did your parents correct that behavior?
What are belts?
hmm That's one form of
Oh,
behavior
behavior modification.
modification.
Yes.
There you go. All right. What stimulus would you call that? Is that external stimulus or internal stimulus? When you
External
got
stimulus.
hmm
External.
So what happens generally when the belt is absent?
More Carolyn said I would be internal.
No, that's still external. It's not coming from you. No,
Really?
when I say
Well,
what is likely to happen if somebody's not there to see you misbehave or behave in the manner that they don't want.
nothing would happen.
Really? You
Really.
wouldn't likely
Yeah.
to do it anyway?
I mean, after a while, but after a while, I'll most likely correct myself.
Maybe, maybe you might.
That's yeah, maybe
You,
might.
yeah,
Maybe might. Yeah.
yeah. So sometimes what happens is external stimulus to behavior modification tends to fail over time because of a lack of personal commitment towards the behavioral change. All right. Um, the the type of behavioral change that we're looking at in this course is for you to want to do it, which means we're looking for what we refer to as internal motivators. So many of us have grown up through life and had our behaviors modified by teachers and parents through some form of punishment or reward. Now, so rewards are also part of the behavior modification type of activity. You ever heard of the Pavlo experiment? Anybody? I'm not picking on
Yes, sir.
Christian. Yeah,
Yes,
still here?
sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
What
sir.
what what do you understand by that Pavlov's experiment? What do you remember of it?
I remember he was using dogs, I believe,
Uh
and
huh.
every time he would ring, that wasn't it?
Yep. Ring a bell.
No.
You're on the right track.
Okay, every time he would ring the bell, he would feed the dog. So the
Right.
dog had in I guess is internal stimulus to the
No.
external stimulus.
Right. So you the
So every
so
time
much.
he would hear the bell ring, he would associate it with food or like
Right. So the
something.
dog started to salivate, expecting that they would be eating. Right. Um. So he constantly did that until he would ring the bell and the dog will behave in a particular manner but not feed him, which was kind of like even worse because he would literally make the dog feel hungry by the ringing the bell without actually following through on the reward of getting something to eat. So that kind of behavior modification is external in nature. Um, Generally, without the stimulation or in the absence of that particular external stimulus, chances are that behaviors can revert back to its original state or to a more primary state. Whereas when we are internally motivated to make a particular change, those tend to stay with us because generally it is the individual who's choosing to make a change for because they see it as something that is beneficial. And again, this is something in human nature. People aren't going to make any kind of change, physical or otherwise, without seeing some sort of personal gain from it. All right, even if the change is one that might be seen as being painful, it's still something that they won't engage in voluntarily, without without some benefit to be gained from it. So I know I can't beat you all. I can't physically beat you all or punish you all in terms of trying to get you to accept some of the behavioral um, things that we're going to be talking about through this program. So we'll see how it goes. We hope, therefore, at the end of the course, you'll be willing to make your own behavioral modifications willingly. So in essence, I'm here to hypnotize you, more or less. So this came up a little bit when Christian was asking about it. We are using a combination of two textbooks. We are using Exploring Leadership from Kumais, Lucas, and McMahon, and we're also using supplementary chapters from the leadership experience from Daft. Now, to differentiate that on this reader list, anything that is simply listed, like chapter 4, understanding self, understanding others, those chapters come from the first text, Exploring Leadership. Where there's a variation, you would see the term or the name DAFT. Chapter 6, DAFT, references a change in text. So at this point here, presentation 5, we have that chapter being dealt with. Then we continue on chapter 9, chapter 8, and those chapters would come from the Exploring Leadership text. And then we switch over from presentation 8 to the DAFT text again, chapter 13, then chapter 12, then chapter 15. All right, that makes better sense there now, Christian. So clearer now,
Yes, I understand now.
right? Okay, cool. All right, so those are the two texts. Now you might be wondering, the texts look a little dated. What we found is that running down the latest edition, the it requires a massive overhaul of the text for us to necessitate major switchovers, because Daft, for example, is putting out the leadership experience every 2 years. He does updates. Primarily, the content doesn't change. Maybe the sequencing will change a little bit from in the newer textbooks, or he might add more up to date case studies and examples. That's about it. The same thing with the exploring leadership, but the core material remains about the same, and that is what is of more importance, which is why we're still using these textbooks. Secondly, the textbooks are outside copyright issues or common use issues, because we're not selling the text. We're just simply using the text. So that's why you can freely download the textbooks without infringing common use. As long as you're not taking the copies and selling them, that's a different issue altogether. But that's a ethical issue that we will have to deal with. All right. So moving into the introductory chapter here, we are going to focus on leadership in a modern environment. Primarily, the text that we're dealing with looks at leadership in the context of the Western, Western civilization. So primarily because of where the texts come from and the types of examples that they're using, we tend to focus on the American experience and the UK experience. All right. We have to bring collectively here, myself and you included, would have to bring in the Caribbean context, because as with anything that we study and we find ourselves, especially in social sciences, not a lot of work has been done specific to the region, and therefore we are kind of borrowing analysis out of the United States, out of the UK and Europe, and supplanting it into the Caribbean context. But we know that there's not going to be this clean fit. So we have to, um, I would say, modify what we're looking at with the Caribbean context. And for our case here, we'll be looking at it specifically with the Trinidadian circumstances, or what takes place locally here. All right. So we do have to spend some time examining local, regional, and the international environments, but we have to do a lot more work specifically when we examine the Caribbean context, because the environment of the Caribbean is a lot different to the environments that the textbooks were written in, which is the normal situation that we tend to find going on here. So the text that we're looking at here, the model that we are looking at, defines leadership as a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. The focal point of this definition is that leadership is about the relationships that we develop. Generally, when you have good relationships with your leaders, we tend to be willing to do a lot more than when we have leaders with whom we have poor relationships with, or dysfunctional relationships with. We tend to be a little more, what's the word, dysfunctional, or we don't really care as much. One of the ways to evaluate this in your own personal experiences would be to look at the nature of your performance in various subject material throughout your studies, and look at your end performance and the nature of the relationship you had with your lecturer or your teachers, as the case might be. Can anybody attest to a negative or positive relationship with your lecturers leading to a positive outcome for you, or vice versa? Can anybody attest to that in their own
Yes,
personal
sir.
experience? St. Hilaire, give us an example. Can you expound on what you're saying?
So,
Go ahead, not hearing you.
oh,
Right, you're kind of fading back and forth.
all right, sorry. In regard to academics, there are courses that I have done that it didn't really intrigue me because of the way in which the teacher or the lecturer was going about um,
Delivering.
giving us the information.
Mm-hmm.
It I would say it negatively impacted my ability to retain the information, which also affected the way in which I performed in the class overall, because I noticed many other subjects within that semester, the lecturers had different teaching styles,
Mm-hmm.
and I did way better in some of the courses compared to that course. And it wasn't that the course was difficult, it was just that I didn't feel motivated to
Right. So,
engage, if that
right,
makes
and
sense.
that engagement or lack of engagement came from the nature of your interactions with your teacher.
Yes, sir.
Right. Anybody else will concur with Mr. Sinclair? Would you agree with him? Anybody?
I would agree with him too.
Yeah. Okay. Any example that you'd like to quote or pull out? Um, Looking for a long time serving person in Costat. Anybody of that ilk here? Somebody who's been in class at least a year or two. Oh, somebody's coming in. Aaliyah, can you tell me what's your surname, Aaliyah? I have a few Aaliyahs in this class. Aaliyah Mohammed. I think it's Aaliyah Mohammed. Welcome aboard. And Priya, welcome back again. All right. All right. So let's move along from the definition of leadership. We want to start looking at how we could classify or examine leadership utilizing various frameworks or frame of references. The first frame of reference we could look at here is through the frame of reference of politics. So when we talk about politics, what we're talking about is about how to arrive in positions of power and how to use that power to influence others to do certain things, either to get what you want and so on. So, should have updated this, but these are the leaders of probably the three most powerful nations in the world today, with the exception of this gentleman here who's just stepped down, and we have Mr. Trump taking over. But these three nations, the leaders of these three nations, are critical because in arriving in their positions of leadership in each individual country, they have been able to, because of the strength, the relative strength of each country, been able to wield a lot of influence based upon the position that they've found themselves in in terms of their political arena. Now, how many of these do you recognize? So we have some of the same people being repeated, and what you would notice that this is the G20 summit from 2023. This is another group of individuals who lead relatively strong countries of varying impact. But there are a couple of countries that are probably more powerful or more influential than others. Of the countries that you see here, which country would you, or which countries might you identify as being least influential in the nature of how things are done in the world around us? Anybody?
Possibly South Africa,
Why would you say South Africa?
because when it comes to the decision makings of anything global, really, you would hear people speak more on um westernized countries
Okay,
in
so
a
actually,
sense.
all right. So one of the things so you may not have recognized this guy, the Ramaphosa, but he is part of a group of nations called the BRICS. Are you familiar with that an acronym, BRICS?
I
I
know the
believe
hotel.
so.
Yeah. Basarat, go ahead. Naya. Sorry, it wasn't Naya. Who was the person who just stepped in there saying that they think they know what it is?
It was me, sir. It has something to do. Is it like is that the BRICS is an acronym for a bunch of countries? It's like
Right.
I think it's China, Russia. I
Well,
can't remember the rest of
if
them,
you go
but I
according to
know
the acronym BRICS, it'll be B would stand for
um
Brazil,
Brazil, Russia,
India,
is Iran, India,
India,
and
China.
China, and I don't know the TH. Sorry,
No,
and the
there's an
rest.
S. It's no, there's no
Uh,
K. It's BRICKS. S
oh,
is South
France.
Africa.
Oh, yeah, South Africa.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. South Africa is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, along with Brazil, um, Russia, India, China. They have banded together, and in fact, currently, especially with China and Russia in kind of the forefront, challenging the U.S. dollar for trade supremacy, which is one of the reasons why um, the U.S. economy is, having problems. The way that people perceive it is because there's a challenge to the U.S. currency. Now, let's say, for instance, the U.S. currency would started to falter, and we started to trade more in Chinese yen. That will make the yen more powerful. You follow what I'm talking about, and that will start to swing the economic power onto another country, because everybody will be demanding their goods, their services, their currency. So those are the kind of things that happens there. So the BRICS actually were is a group of countries that are trading, but they're not trading using U.S. dollars. They're using, I think it's the Chinese yen that they're utilizing, or there's a new currency that they're trying to push. This is especially um, to with cryptocurrencies as well is playing a role in this as well, because you can't control cryptocurrencies as well as easily as you can normal or regular type currencies coming out of printed foundries and stuff like that. Make sense? All right. So we understand this whole thing about influence and power, right? And how you arrive at any particular time. Another framework through which we could look at leadership is through management. But management is going to focus on the outcomes of the manager or the leader in relation to their ability to get the maximum out of the minimum that they have. So when we look at success in business, what we look for is success seen through profitability. So this is gives rise to a number of different people here. How many of these faces do you recognize? Anybody? I'm sure some of you recognize some of these faces.
There's
I
quite a lot
recognize about four of
of
them too.
faces.
For them, okay, so there was a young lady who was speaking first. Tell me who you are and which faces you recognized.
I say it was me again.
Who's me again?
It's Naya.
Naya. Okay, Naya. Cool. Which ones you recognize?
Well, the obvious, Elon Musk,
Uh huh.
Mark Wahlberg, not Mark Wahlberg. Um,
Which
Mark
Wahlberg?
Zuckerberg,
Okay. I don't know what Wahlberg I
Oprah
have.
Winfrey,
Uh huh. All right, that's this person.
Jay-Z.
All right, Jay-Z.
Um, I forgot this guy's name next to Miss Oprah Winfrey.
This guy here
Um,
or
no,
this guy here?
the the one that you're currently on.
All right. Anybody
Yeah.
help out? Or anybody who knows? Virgin Records, Virgin Airlines. He kind of works a little bit with Elon Musk. All right, Richard Branson. Anybody else? What about this guy here? Anybody recognizes him?
Bill Gates.
Right. What about this guy? Nope. Okay. How about this guy? This he should be a little more familiar.
Jeffrey Bezos.
Jeff Bezos.
Or
I
Jeff.
think he
Yeah.
prefers. Yeah, I think he prefers Jeff. What is he famous for?
Owner of Amazon, I
Right.
believe.
That's where he gets the profits that he gets it. So each of the individuals that are here, some of them you know, some of them you may not know, from just seeing them. Each of them have over time proven themselves to be leaders in business because they've been able to aggregate a lot of profit. So their worth, their dollar value has become the measurement of performance. But does that dollar value performance speak to something good for the society? Yes, no? That's a question. It's not a
It
statement.
doesn't necessarily benefit the
Unnecessarily.
society.
Correct, yes. And that's why the framework of looking at leadership only through the lens of management can be flawed because in management we look at success measured through profit. But profit is not the only way in which we measure the success of any individual or leader. So another framework that we've looked at leadership through is through the framework of anthropology. And this is where we kind of historically look backwards at the nature of leadership in cultures gone by examining the way their culture was shaped, how it was run, how things worked, looking at the language and the language development, the tools that they developed, various aspects of the symbols that they utilize to represent things, the norms and their behavior. So, if you survived or you were, however you ended up, 1,000 years from now, and you're looking back at 2025 and the 2020s of Earth, what do you think we would uncover as evidence of our life and culture back then, if we were 1,000 years from now in 30,025? What do you think we might find that will be indicative of our culture? What tools, languages? What will we find that will be symptomatic or symbolic of us as leaders, or our culture back then? You might find a whole pile of these. I don't know if you all see this. Emojis all over the place, right? Not so? You might find a whole pile of phones. Um, um, these uh, these devices all over the place, because those have become what are more symptomatic of our lives to date. Not so? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
If our archaeologists come back visiting our time frame, that's what they likely to find, a whole pile of devices and um, various types of online environment situations and hard drives all over the place. What would it say about us as a people that
All
we
right. What is
communicate? We communicate using small pictures. Think about it from the aspect of we still can't decipher a lot of hieroglyphics that the Egyptians used. So think about it from that perspective. By the time 30, 25, we might have done away with oral communication, and we're all communicating via some form of mind mind melding nonsense. Who knows? So anthropology kind of like tries to do that. So when we look backwards at societies in our past, we try to look at the archaeology. We do engage in archaeological digs. We try to find what tools they utilized during their things. What was their languages like? Now, a lot of times here now we're dealing with a society that's disappeared, so we have to guess at their linguistics and their communications by examining the written word and what is left of their written word. Because I mean, if you think about it, if we were to have some sort of apocalypse past now, I mean, lots of our life as it exists now will just disappear. How much survives depends upon sheer luck and chance in a lot of instances. All right, so anthropology tries to evaluate the nature of how societies ran in the past, and they would look at the whole concept of, well, how do leaders emerge in that society? How do leaders emerge in our society now? And generally, we still have a whole combination of different systems of leadership that emerges through, well, we have democratic voting, we still have where there is the might of the military determining leadership. We have all in the one space called Earth. We have different systems existing side by side. And so, therefore, I mean, somebody coming back from the past visiting us, or digging up our remains might find a very, um, find it difficult to work out how leadership evolved, how our societies worked, that type of stuff, given where they are, because perspective will be different. So that's a challenge. I mean, and this is one of the reasons why anthropology and archaeology is such a very interesting field of study, something for us to think about there. All right, so another framework is we look at is true history. So when we look at history, what we're looking at is the emergence of key people during significant times in the world's history. And this is collectively across the board. Generally, we look at major movements or major social activities that are taking place and the key individuals that rose to prominence during that period. So, first off, what do these four people, or what period, or what drew these four guys together? What event in world history?
World War Two.
Hmm. So, can you identify the characters, this cast of characters?
I can identify Adolf Hitler. I can't
Only
identify anybody else.
really okay. Anybody could identify any of the other guys besides? Look at who she remembers. The bad guy. Anybody remembers anybody else from here? Anybody sees Winston Churchill, the guy with the bowler hat, the guy with the military outfit on? That's Joseph Stalin, precursor to the Soviet Union. And then the gentleman on the extreme left here, that is Roosevelt, President Roosevelt from the United States. Um, Recognize them now?
Yes, sir. I knew their names. I just didn't know how they looked.
Okay, so now you do. And these guys rose to prominence because of the actions of one of the four, Adolf Hitler, in his aggression in trying to conquer most of Europe. And of course, people weren't in agreement with what he did. And of course, after a lot of the war was fought, they found even more horrific evidence of his agenda. Um, which literally surprised nobody, but it was horrific the way it was discovered and the manner in which it was done. I mean, the countless movies about the atrocities of this particular war um, across the board. And then, of course, from this conflict, we had the emergence of the Soviet Union, which with Russia and England rebuilding after World War II, Russia and the United States began crossing swords and trying to get into some level of dominance over each other, which then led to the emergence of the Cold War. So that's another set of conflict that came up afterwards in relation to that. But initially, these guys, Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt, worked together against um, um, uh, Nazi Germany to be able to get rid of him. But then afterwards, they kind of fell out with each other, kind of thing. All right, let's look at another individual. Anybody's familiar with this gentleman?
That's
Martin
Martin
Luther
Luther
King.
King.
Right? What is he? What part or what event in history is he associated with?
He had a dream of a free America.
Right, but what movement is that? What social movement was that? Yes, he had a dream of a free America. All right. So he was part of the civil rights movement in the United States, correct? Would, would, would that ring a bell? The civil rights movement?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is.
All right. So how about this gentleman? Anybody recognizes him? Funny looking guy. He's very young here too. Would it surprise you that this is a Trinidadian? He renamed himself actually, and his character was featured in a film called The Black Klansman. Anybody ever looked at that movie, The Black Klansman? No? Hmm.
No, sir.
All right. So there was a gentleman who became synonymous with the Black Power movement in Trinidad and Tobago. His given name was Michael, but he renamed himself Kwame Ture. You all familiar with that name now? Maybe I should get
It
a
sounds
Really?
relatively familiar.
Kwame Ture. Yes, Michael Stokely. He was a student in the United States in the coming to the end of the 40s into the 50s, and he kind of got active in the Black Power movement. And in the late 60s, 70s, he became very part of the Black Panther movement, and was one of the leaders in that organization. In fact, Stokely Carmichael influenced the Black Power movement here in Trinidad. And as Kwame Ture, he came here and he started to seek equal treatment under the in employment and that type of stuff in Trinidad, which then led to the development and the Black Power movement and the Black Power revolution here in Trinidad. You're familiar with that? We had what they refer to as the 1970s revolution here in Trinidad, right? Yes? You're familiar with that
Yes, sir.
noise? No? Yes? Familiar
Yes,
with it?
sir.
Heard of it? Heard of it?
Yes, sir.
All right. So he's one of the guys that is credited with some of the influence of us moving towards where we are today, given what was done in the past. And this was a young man just going to the States to study. I just think about it from that perspective. All right. So if we look at this bunch of individuals here, we have a few repeats here from different photographs. Each one of these individuals rose to prominence because of some sort of situation that was prominent over that time frame. So let's choose a few. Do you recognize any of them? Let's start with that. There are a few who we already repeated. We had Roosevelt here. We have Hitler here. We have Winston Churchill with the famous peace sign. Who else we already met in previous photographs? Martin Luther King, we met him. All right, so you're familiar with this gentleman here? This guy looks familiar?
Yes,
Yes,
sir. That's
sir.
Nelson Mandela.
Right. So what is he noted for? What part of what social movement was he involved with?
He was the president of South Africa.
Uh-huh.
Um, I believe he had like, I'm really not sure, but I'm really not sure.
You know, Cho, anybody can join her to clarify?
He was in the civil rights movement, and he had strikes to protest the apartheid.
Apartheid, yes?
Yeah.
A system of governance used where? Apartheid was used in which country?
Hold on, sir. It's in my head. Um, um, South Africa, right?
Yes, that's it. Yes. So it was with him and the um, in South Africa, he agitated for. He ended up spending most of his life in jail, actually, because the South African government, under the apartheid system, outlawed or made any person of black origin to be a second class individual and therefore subjected to certain types of laws and regulations, almost like the Jim Crow laws in the United States at the time, um, which caused segregation in society, in especially in the southern states of the United States, which is some of the things that the civil rights movement in the United States was dealing with. And then I remember I was still in school when apartheid was still running itself in South Africa. I remember us having debates about it, um, its origins and that kind of stuff. This gentleman who's next to him is Cecil Roach. He was one of the prime ministers of South Africa at the time, in making sure that the apartheid system stayed put. All right, and ensure that the white minority maintained control of the economic um, purse strings and direction of the economy. Soon afterwards, we had a that broke down, and you had a situation there where they um, dismantled the apartheid system. Now, just below him, we have Ronald Reagan, Fidel Castro. This guy with his hand in the air is Khrushchev. He was one of the premiers of the Soviet Union, and this was the last premier. Um, Khrushchev and I can never Gorbachev, the guy with the kind of stain on his forehead. These guys were related to each other because they were sort of at the height, or were at they were the heart of the Cold War movement. And um, this gentleman here, whose picture is clearer, took the Soviet Union out of the Cold War. Sort of like he actually ended the Soviet Union, and that's actually when the Berlin Wall was torn down and all that type of stuff, and the Soviet Union disbanded, and it became what it is today, which is just plainly back to Russia. It's not the Soviet Union anymore. So that's an important set of history here, and the Cuba is probably the last remnants of a Soviet, or what we call a socialist state that exists. And the reason why he's juxtaposed against Ronald Reagan is because Ronald Reagan has imposed a great number of trade embargoes on the Cuban economy, leading to a lot of strife and problems for the Cuban nationals. And of course, there was this whole thing about they have to crush them and whatnot. So there was a whole set of things arising around them. What about anybody recognizes this blonde lady here? This
Yes,
young, who's that?
that's Pauline Monroe.
Well, not Marlene, but Marilyn,
Oh,
uh,
sorry.
or Norma May, which was her correct name. But Marilyn Monroe, what is she influential about? Because these are influential leaders. What she led us into.
Well, from what I know about her, she was a very famous actor.
Uh huh.
Um, and I believe I also know her about because of her her birthday song to the president of the United States at the
Right.
time.
Yeah, she was. Well, that president is not featured here, but she was noted for being
Yeah.
a concert to JFK. Yes. Plus, they had the
Um.
thing that she is influential for was fashion, but more importantly, the emergence of this blonde bombshell, the blonde bombshell in the acting industry. But she was a very serious actor. Unfortunately, she took her own life at some point in time. Um, you know, being mistreated the way she was in the thing. If you ever look at I think there's a biography on her life called The Blonde or something like that, I can't remember the name of it. I'll check it out, and if I do remember, I'll get back to you. What about these gentlemen here? These four monkey-looking guys and this greasy
That's the
hair-looking fella.
Beatles.
Sorry, who are these guys?
That's the Beatles,
The
correct?
Yeah,
Beatles.
that's the Beatles and this greasy-eyed, doe-eyed looking guy.
That's Elvis Presley.
What are they influenced? What did they influence?
Music.
music.
hmm Specifically rock and roll and its emergence as mainstream music. Because prior to them, rock and roll music was black people music. You understand? And
Yeah.
it wasn't something
So,
that white folks listened to. All
so
right? Yes? Mr. Sinclair? Yes?
is it really influential? Because they kind of like stole stuff and then
Yes,
like
they
just
did.
made it their
They
own.
both
And
they
it,
they both
they
did.
both just, that was not, I don't,
But
in a way.
what they did and what they're credited with is bringing that type of music to the forefront and making it popular. If you understand what I mean.
And it was, well, more like a racist society. So like it was
Very
better to
very
have like a
racist.
white
Yeah.
person be the figurehead for something, knowing that it wasn't
Correct.
them that created.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't personally racist individuals, but what they were able to do was to bridge a gap between the two cultures. If you think about it from a cultural point of view, they were able to blend um, a lot of a lot of jazz and a lot of the rock and roll and blues together and sort of bring it forward into mainstream music, which then sort of paved the way for other acts to follow, like Motown and the others, that were able to find their own way through, given the influence that these guys to say, hey, something's happening from this part of the world, and we need to pay attention to it because look, these guys made millions of dollars, or they made a name for themselves using the influence coming from the black influences in the United States and the hillbilly influences coming from the British rock scene as well. And they were able to connect and communicate that music and that feel into popular music. Because remember when they first started, rock and roll was not seen as something that was first off, it was youth music, and um, it was seen as something that was divisive and um, literally it was supposed to be the devil's spawner. So you have to remember where they came from and what the environment was like when they started playing their music and doing that type of stuff. Even Elvis Presley got um, a lot of people frowned at how he used to dance and the kind of gospel type music, and he would blend the two together. Even Ray Charles ran into problems like that as a blind black guy too as well. So you have a whole lot of things that's one of the reasons why you could look back at some of the biographies and the sort of docudrama films that have emerged around these past leaders and influencers. And you could look back at it and you wonder, no, if it wasn't for them, who would have done what they did, kind of situation. Where would we have been if these guys didn't come to the forefront and do what they did? And that's across the board in all walks of life. All right. Okay. So let's leave these guys and this page of various types of historical influential people to look at one of the other areas that we want to look at in terms of how we look at leadership. And that's through the lens of psychology and sociology. Psychology obviously tries to look at understanding how individuals behave, why they behave particular ways, and sociology will focus its attention on looking at how we as groups operate and interact. So, with that in mind, what I'm focusing on here is Sigmund Freud, who's the guy holding this cigar. The guy in the middle is Karl Marx, and the guy on the right hand side is B.F. Skinner. These guys, Karl Marx is famous for a number of other things, but what he's also a sociologist and put forward a lot of good theories about trying to understand society. Karl Marx, not Karl Marx, but Sigmund Freud, on the other hand, he was the leading guy who pushed forward psychoanalysis theories and that type of stuff, understanding individual behavior. B.F. Skinner kind of brought a lot of what they did in the past because he's more modern in nature. And he was really influential in the development of behavioral sciences in the field of education. And those kind of theories that he was able to pull together heavily influence leadership studies that we have today. So the different theories of leadership that we are going to be looking at, and these are the various theories that we're going to look at, all of them, the vast majority of them, I should say, hinge upon understanding individual behavior and group behaviors. So the current thinking in terms of leadership leadership studies hinges around the concept of a lot of sociology and psychology. So it's heavily dependent upon that. I think in the next class we're going to be looking at the evolution of the theory and that type of stuff that's going on. So that brings us to a question. In your field of study, what is, how is leadership perceived, and how do you feel about it? So let's say, St. Hilaire, what area are you working in? What's your area of study?
Did I say? Oh, I do MLT. I do
ML,
MLT.
right.
So my
Okay.
area is health sciences.
Right.
Um,
So how does
I've
somebody in your field arrive in a position of leadership?
um, I believe with years and years of experience and continuous education in the different disciplines. Usually
Correct.
people get
Hmm.
positions. Um,
And they also have to do
of
work,
high.
right? And they also have to produce work that holds up to international scrutiny. Not so?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, good. So I mean, you're at the beginning of the journey. So where you end up depends upon the effort that you put in, right?
That's true.
hmm What about Christian? What field are you active in?
Accountant, sir.
Right? How do accountants arrive in leadership positions?
Um,
That's a double-edged question, but we'll see. Let me see how you treat it. Not
actually,
similar years of experience and qualifications.
I would say similar in that part. Yes, sir.
hmm So they emerge into leadership positions based upon it. We call it pay and dues, right? Naya, what about you? What area are you with, Miss Bassarat?
Um, I'm in radiography.
Uh huh.
So in radiography, similar to what the rest of them said, years of experience. Also, patient care would get you to a higher level in certain situations.
Uh huh.
If you specialize in the different fields, once you constantly produce good work, things like that.
Right. All right. But you have a bit of a limitation in terms of actually working with the equipment.
Um, in what sense?
Well, you have a lifespan that you can't go beyond.
Oh well, yeah.
You want to explain that to your classmates?
Um, Not really.
You should.
'Cause-
Because the recommended time frame is 10 years max, right?
um, Technically, it
But it
is.
could be sooner. Depends upon your level of exposure.
Technically, it is 10 years max. However, in Trinidad and Tobago,
Yeah, I know.
um, we don't really follow that lifespan. I think if you're in the more radiation centered fields, such as like
Mm-hmm.
radiation therapy, nuclear imaging, things like that, it
Mm-hmm.
would apply more there. However,
Yeah,
if you
but
stay to more of the TMR spots like
systems, yeah.
X-ray,
Yeah, yeah.
MRI, CT, you're able to stay for a longer period of time.
Yeah. So it depends
Especially if you
upon,
choose. Yeah.
yeah. It really does depend upon your the area of expertise you or the area of specialization you decide to go into,
Yes,
which will
sir.
really determine the longevity. Yeah, but there's a reason for that, and the reason is because of the degree of exposure to radioactive substances utilized, and that's why if you ever go for an X-ray, there's gonna hide behind a lead wall,
No,
and
sir, we don't hide behind the lead wall.
you still do it, you still hide behind a
No,
damn lead
we
wall,
don't hide.
you
We
hide.
try to minimize the
I am
amount of
as a patient, I
exposure.
see myself in front of this big machine and you are hiding behind a wall.
No, sir, we're
So
not
I
hiding.
don't
Okay,
hide.
We're
well,
I
just
don't.
minimize our exposure. Because we're in
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
radiation
don't.
all day. So
uh-huh.
if you're in
So
it all
yes, sir.
day,
yeah,
excess
so
exposure will obviously be harmful to your health. However, as a patient, you're not getting that much radiation. You're
yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
safe.
Yeah, so they say.
So I hide in. Me and TV. Not here. Not I hide in.
Yeah, of course you would. Um, there are certain industries where the damage that can be done is a lot more than in other areas, and this is one of them. Another field that is quite dangerous too is process plant operations. Now we don't do that program here, but I did lecture that program when I was across at John Donaldson, and there was a limit to some industries. For example, they wouldn't hire women um, for the reason that the product, especially the ammonia and the nitrates area, the plants that were producing nitrates, they will not hire female operators. Why is that? Anybody knows?
So this could also be
Is it
said
only
in radiography,
Yeah, but this
it,
one was even more aggressive.
but it has to do with um your hormones, basically.
That's it. And in a lot of the instances in those industries, women were not hired simply because it was known that their breast in particular, they were prone to breast cancer in those industries. Um, it was something that men, interestingly enough, working in those industries are prone to testicular cancer. So there's that issue they have to watch out for too, as well. So, but you get paid heaps of money for that, huh? So that's the only difference. So, in those high risk jobs, you're supposed to be compensated with high risk wages. So that's the up and down side of any sort of profession. All right, so let's. All right, so we wanna start going into examining the framework that of the relational leadership model, but I want to offer you guys to get a little break. Take about 10 minutes. We'll be back about, let's say, 6:50, 6:55. Would that be okay with everybody?
yes,
Yes.
sir.
No.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I forgot to turn on my camera. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All right. So yeah, let's take a little break for about 10 minutes. Get a stretch. Go and take a walk. Drink some water or whatever it is, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Cool. All right. See you all in a little bit. All right. So I think I know I forgot that my camera was off. So at one point in time, I was displaying some stuff, um, and I did not stop the recording. So we have this long pause. uh, Hopefully, people will be back in a little while. Right. So I think I forgot. I was trying to show you guys this emoji type thing that we're showing. Um, that a lot of our language comes with now. In fact, I think we have in the reaction thing we can get some of those things going across with it and stuff like that. So imagine that somebody coming back from the past and looking at some string of text and all they're seeing is a set of letters, LOL, and um, um, I don't know some of the text things that we use, but we'll see. All right. Hopefully people are back. Yes, maybe, no. Or am I too early?
Yes, sir, we're back.
Well, some of you. All right, let's get back to where we were. We were beginning to look at the framework that we are going to be examining in this program, and it's referred to as the relational leadership model. It's the model based upon that definition of leadership that we started with at the beginning, which spoke about leadership being about the relationship that we have with people in order to accomplish some goals and objectives. So, the leadership model, the relational leadership model, sits upon a lot of the psychological, sociological, and educational behavioral sciences that developed over the period that we're going to look at in the next chapter in terms of the evolution of the theories. In the next chapter, we'll look at that. The framework that we are looking at is going to require that we focus a lot of our attention on learning about ourselves, learning about how others see us, that's self awareness in the context of others, and understanding your own personal belief structures. All right. I'm going to mute off Miss Lewis here. Her microphone's open and kind of disturbing me. All right. So, some of the assignments that you're going to be doing are already going to focus your attention on doing this self-assessment, both in the context of yourself as well as in relevance of how other people see you, which is what the first two presentations of the chapters 4 and 5 would do. Understanding self and then understanding others. That's what they're going to focus on. In this leadership development process, we spoke already about developing a critical sense of awareness, self awareness, being able to effectively listen, collaboration, compromise, and of course, putting all of these things into daily practice. Now, of the 5 things that are listed here, the one that is probably the most misunderstood is effective listening. So let's get some clarification. Let me call on Miss Thomas. Um, Miss Thomas, are you able to open your microphone and contribute? No? How about Miss Belfon? Belfon.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, what do you understand by the term effective listening?
That will be
Mm-hmm.
no, sir. I'm just trying to find the correct way. But essentially, to not just be listening, to be able to follow with what the person's saying and like regurgitate it if asked,
Regurgitated. Okay, that's an
and
interesting term.
understand.
All right. Okay, but for us to effectively listen to somebody, there's something that we have to do inside ourselves. You think you could identify? What's that? Oh, sorry, missed that. How about Ariel?
What we have to do
Uh huh.
inside.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have to let go, I think,
Let go
of
of what?
our internal need to want to say what we have to say rather
Right,
than
that's one thing. Yes, we
yeah,
have to dispense with that. But what is
yeah.
that indicative of? What does it mean we're doing when we are suppressing responses that we normally would give people? There's something that we have to repress or control or dismantle in order to do that. Anybody gets a gist of where I'm going with this? You could jump in and contribute.
So
It's an,
you really
Specific
have to like
bias.
all right, I see Miss Modest. Go ahead, Miss Modest.
you really have to like concentrate on what the person saying.
Yes, yes, that's part of the process. What else?
Not be judgmental,
That's
like
it.
let go of biasness.
That's perfect. Excellent. You got it nail on the head one shot, which is the biggest problem in effective listening is our prejudgment. So we have to break down our own biasness towards whatever or whoever we're speaking to, whatever we're speaking about, or whoever we're speaking to, we have to dismantle that. And that is the part that needs practice because it's the most difficult aspect of effective listening that we have to engage in. Funny enough, effective listening is easier with people with whom we don't have personal relationships with. But with people that we have connections, very close connections, it can be family members and so on, our prejudgment sits foremost in our mind. And it oftentimes prevents us from truly listening to the individual because we are uh, immediately judging what they're saying. That makes sense? And you can't really help it, but it's something that you have to learn to control. Simply because this person that you having a conversation, you have a relationship with them, either some sort of parent or maybe a spouse or a brother or sister, some sort of relationship, be it personal or a family type relationship. Because of your emotional connectivity with them kind of creates its own barrier to effectively listening, because we are caught up in the emotional response we're having to that. Now, in order to be effective leaders, we have to put into practice that dismantling of our predisposition to judge people. And that's not an easy thing to do, which is one of the things that we have to be to do that is to be aware of our own biases. If we know we are having problems with having a bias against particular types of ideas or methods or ways of thinking about things. Let's say, for instance, you're engaging with somebody and having a discussion about something that they're going to do, and you have very firm feelings about it. Let's say they're engaging in a discussion with you about having an abortion, for example, and you have a position that you take, pro-choice, pro-life, and depending on where you stand, if you know that you're already biased towards that, you have to work doubly hard to listen to somebody without judging them. Similarly, when you have to have conversations with people who have alternative lifestyle choices, or they do things that make you absolutely angry with them, because you just don't like what they do. Those are the times you have to put into effect your control mechanisms. Have to be really, really practice with to be able to handle that story. Listening to things that you don't like is the hardest thing. Listening to people you like and things that you like is easy. A good way to practice this is find a talk show and listen to somebody talking absolute rubbish, at least from your position, and try to get the point that they're trying to make. Try to understand what the person is trying to say, how they feel. Walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. All right. Some of the foundation principles of leadership is that it concerns us all. And this is problematic because at different ages, we tend to look at, especially when we're younger, we tend to look at leadership, especially in political activities and government and such, as not being of any value to us. And the reality is that in looking back in your life, everything that a government chooses to do, especially in a country like ours, the impact of their decision making impacts directly upon how well we can do in our lives. A lot of the policies that the government uses or doesn't use, or some of the decisions that they make, directly impact upon us. So we have to impact upon people that, yes, you might not be too concerned with the leadership around you, but it is of concern to you. Simultaneously, you have to, as a leader, now understand that whereas you may view leadership as being critical and important, other people would view it as something absolutely dispensable. All right. So the second point is viewed and valued differently by everybody. Thirdly, leadership is not something that once you arrive in a position of leadership, it's not something that remains static. It's something that is flexible. It's fluid. You must, as a leader, be able to change, adjust, and flow with the situation that you're coming into to just with. Similarly, as a follower in that situation, you also have to be flexible and not expect a leader to remain a static individual. All right. Another element here is that different types of settings call for different styles or types of leadership practice, and that's something we're going to look at in more details um, as we move through. And the last one, which is even more important, is that leadership is a skill that can be learned and developed. Now, far too long people, in fact, we're going to debate this topic. Far too long people think of people being born with leadership skills, or born to lead, or what we call natural born leaders. Evidence doesn't support this born leadership concept. Leadership is something that you have to learn and you have to develop your skills. It's not something that's inherently genetic in any individual. Taking up leadership positions in different circumstances is something that can be taught, it can be developed, and can be developed and can be learned. Right? So it's something that we have to also take into consideration, that if we still have the concept that some people are born into leadership positions, we have to get beyond that. In order to develop our leadership, further foundations, it requires us to commit to the highest ethical standards possible, and to encourage change and social responsibility in those around us and within ourselves. Now, with that comes the ability to think critically, to exhibit credibility and authenticity, be of the highest level of integrity through our ethical conduct. Now, some of these things are, just they're just words that sit on a page at this point in time. But your credibility is going to be affected by how authentic an individual you are. You must say what you must mean what you say, and you must follow and act according to what you believe. If there is a disconnect between what you say and what you do, then both your credibility and integrity will be shaken, and you can't undo some of that damage if you damage your integrity. And similarly, it speaks to the underlying ethical principles that govern your conduct. Now, one of the things that is the most difficult of this list here is the fact that critical thinking is not something that is encouraged, and that's a problem that we have to deal with, because our educational system has drummed out of us the ability to exercise critical thinking. Now, I know some of us have been able to reinstill that curiosity to question things and to question everything, and don't just accept things because somebody said it, and the only reason why they said it is because they're in charge. Critical thinking means that you um, you deconstruct things and look at it for what it is, and you break it down in a logical sequence and try to break it up and understand it before you actually start to before you start to have an opinion about something. You must critically understand a thing. The problem with this is that far too long in our education system, we've been telling students to stifle that critical curiosity. Because if you remember, when you're in a classroom, they put you in these lines, and you sit in these chairs, and you sit in a line, and they tell you shut up and listen. And the minute you start asking questions, some teachers will entertain them, but at some point in time they'll get fed up and tell you, listen, hold your questions until another time. Um, yes, that is true, but at the same time, it even happens in the household. So think of a child. How many people here might have children? Anybody here? Or even think of yourself. How many times have you gone to your parents and kept on asking why? Why do we do this? Or why are we doing this? And why does this happening? Or why is this? And then after a while, what happens? They get fed up with you and they tell you, well, hush up. Or they tell you something like, we're doing this because I said so. Any of you all ever got that type of response from your parents or your teachers? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
sir.
Hmm.
Yes,
And
sir.
that's how you end up stifling critical thinking, because there's a natural curiosity in all of us to understand things, but eventually it gets beaten out of us. Another thing that's beaten out of us is creativity. Um, Given free reign, we would do things, without out having to be asked to do it, and do all kind of madness, and examine, stuff. We wouldn't be afraid to, take paint and just spread it all over the place and make images of pictures we're seeing in our minds. But pretty soon somebody's going to look at that and start to judge it and say, that's rubbish, this is good, that's good. And then we start to retract our creativity because we become fearful of the judgment that we get from other people. So that's another way in which the systems around us um, suppress critical thinking and suppress creativity, because if somebody is too creative and too critical thinking, they become a maverick on in the system, and people start to look at them and treat them differently, them special, that kind of that kind of thinking. um, the reason for that is because if somebody is always critical, they're difficult to control, and that's what the education system is primarily set up to do, is to teach us how to self-regulate, how to stop ourselves from being critical, stop ourselves from being creative outside the boundaries of the disciplines that we're looking at. It's a double-edged sword, and unfortunately, we have been indoctrinated in that. I mean, now that um, the the country needs people with greater creativity and better critical thinking. Now they're trying to tell you, after years of telling you to shut up and listen, to think on your own. All right. So it's a weird situation. All right. Now, leaving that aside, there are some developmental processes that we have to go through as individuals, choosing to decide that we want to, take up leadership positions. First off, you must know yourself. Second, you need to understand how change occurs and why it occurs. And thirdly, you need to understand why other people see things differently to you. And that's an important element, because if we cannot begin to understand why people see things differently, then we are going to run into some problems across the board, because we are going to literally have issues with with understanding others if we don't try to see what's happening with other people. So let me ask Aaliyah. Aaliyah, can you open your mic? If not, let's try Cruikshank. Adissa. Ms. Rampasad, possibly?
Hi.
Hi. What are you seeing on the screen there, besides what's written on the top? What
A
image
skull.
what do you see? A skull?
Yeah.
You see anything else?
Well, a lady looking at her reflection.
Right. And it's interesting the way they line up. It makes up that skull looking thing, right?
Yeah.
All right, good. So everybody else is seeing that image?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Right, good. And they understand the sort of picture in picture that we're looking at there, right? So there are really two images that we have there. All right, so let's look at this one. Ms. Rampasad, what do you see here?
A lady, I guess. Well, like a side profile.
Side profile of a lady looking over her shoulder.
Yeah, you could say so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So this is her nose hair, and this is her eyelashes looking over that way, right? This is her hair, kind of below. This is her ears hair, right?
Mhm.
And this is kind of like a shawl or something that she has, and a feather coming out, and of course this coat,
Yeah,
and this mark here. This is like a one of those, what do you call them? Kind of like a choker.
yeah. A
Yeah.
choker.
Okay. Cool. Everybody sees that young lady looking over the shoulder.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yes,
Anybody see?
sir.
All right. Anybody seeing anything else?
And yes, sir, I see an old lady.
Uh huh.
Older lady. It's yeah.
What she did? What is the older lady doing?
She's looking down. It's like she has her face is slightly covered, so you just see like her nose and her chin.
Right. Okay. Anybody else seeing that? Ariel, are you
Yeah, a
seeing?
lady in a hood.
Yeah. She's wearing a hood and she's looking down. Is everybody seeing both those images? The lady looking over her shoulder and the older lady looking down? Who's
Only when
No,
not?
she
sir.
said that.
No, sir, I just seen one image.
Which one are you seeing?
The lady looking over her shoulder.
Uh huh. All right. Saint Hilaire, you seeing both?
Yes, so it's only when she stated and
You saw
described
it?
it that
Yeah.
one of it's
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So let's be honest here, because it's a little bit of a perception trick. How many people can see this old lady by a show of hands? Or maybe show of hands who doesn't see the old lady? Well, okay, Ariel, we know you saw it. Put your hand up. Who's not seeing this old lady? Two, three. Whoa, good bit to you. All right. Put your hands down. Let's go through a little exercise. Put your hands down. So, of these people, everybody can more or less see that woman looking over her shoulder, right? Let's work out how to see the old lady in the picture. All right. First things first, close your eyes and slightly shift where you are in your, in terms of how you're looking at your screen. All right. Close your eyes. Keep it closed. All right. Now, when I tell you to open your eyes, you'll open your eyes and listen to what I have to say and follow my mouse when I describe the things. All right. Okay. So open your eyes and listen. There's an old lady. She's looking down. This is her chin. This is her mouth. She has a rather large, prominent nose. This is her nose. This is one eye, and this is the shadow of her eyelashes poking over the nose. This is the frond of her hair poking out under this shawl that she's wearing here. And she has a dark, shabby coat on. This is her chin. This is her mouth. This is her nose. This is her ears. Sorry, this is her eye. And this is the eyelashes from the other eye on the other side of her nose. This is the front of her hair just hanging out in front of the shawl that's covering the rest of her hair. And of course, well, she has this plume, this feather. All right. Everybody seeing that now?
Yes, sir.
It
Hmm.
still kind of doesn't look like an old lady to me.
What does it look like to you?
I
Some
want
people,
to say it looks like a kind of animal.
well, it's not an animal, but some people say she looks like a witch, an old hag, bent over, looking. It's almost like a depressed woman looking down, down on her luck, with her chin is buried into her chest, type of thing. This, if you imagine, this is a coat that she's wearing, and she's looking down. Her chin is sticking into the chest. This hair is the nose. These are the eyes, the hair, and that stuff. Mm. So notice the effort it took to see both images. This is the impact of this story that we're going through here. This exercise. It takes effort to find the alternative. All right. For some people, in fact, this is a personality test thing that people use sometimes. When you first see it, what do you see? So if you see the young girl easily, some people see the old person easily. It depends upon the frame of mind that you're in at any point in time, I think. But some people use it as a sort of personality test um, scenario. All right. And it's important for us to take the effort to look for the differences in the image, because if we look at this image here, both of these individuals are right. And half the time when we argue about differences that we see, it's simply because where we are, we're unable to see what the other person sees. Because both of these gentlemen here are right. From where he stands, it's a 9. From where he stands, it's a 6. No amount of yelling is going to get that anywhere going on. You understand? This is the adage of, for you to truly understand somebody else's point of view, you must walk in their shoe. So imagine if this guy just, walked around to where this guy stood and looked at the object on the ground. And he would probably agree, it's a 6. And if he took a walk around on his side, say it's a 9. You follow what I'm talking about? Makes sense now? So it's important for us to remember that we need to understand why others see things differently. And sometimes all it needs is us taking the making the effort to try to see things from their perspective. All right? And you'd be surprised how much success you would have with that. All right. So the second of the three basic principles in the developmental process is the being. So yes, we know, now we must be. We must be ethical in our behavior. We must be principled in our beliefs. We must be open to others. We must be caring of others. And we must be inclusive. Of all of these, the most difficult is to be open, caring, and inclusive. Ethical and principled. And this is even truer for people who have very high and very what's the word I want to use? Well defined ethical values. They are very, oftentimes, very closed off, and they are difficult to, they can't include people who don't think like them or don't have the same principles. This happens too often, way too often, that as a leader, our own principles stops us from being inclusive to other people who value things differently to us. Okay, so the inclusivity factor is going to be a challenge for a lot of people. So that's something that you're going to have to work on. Again, all of this is exercises. Richard Branson had this statement here: having a personality of caring about people is important. You can't be a good leader unless you generally like people. And this is unfortunately true in all walks of life. I have come across students and teachers who simply they don't care about people, and that it you can see it in their behavior. You can feel it in their interactions with people. And if you don't care about them, nobody's going to respect you as a leader. All right, and you're not going to be able to encourage people to do the best that they can do if you don't care about them. All right, and it's easily seen in people around you. Huh? So the last element is the doing element. We must do as we say. We must act socially responsible and in a consistent manner and congruent manner. What does that mean? It means that in every instance, my values can't vary. So, and it must be congruent in all aspects of my life. So my private life, my public life, my whatever other lives you have, you are consistently applying you the same types of behavior and actions across the board. Your value system is not varying based upon where you are. When you're out and about, you're all well and good, but when you're home, you're a grouch, and you're you're uncaring of people and stuff like that. All right. So in all walks of life, all walks of your life, you have to be consistently and congruently responsible and act according to what your belief structure is. All right. So far, so good. Everybody's following this. So when we talk about socially responsible, here we're talking about the principle of making sure that what we do does not negatively impact upon the wider society that we operate in. This is especially something that's important for profit generating firms. In fact, so much so that there's a whole section on social responsibility and social presence, positive social presence. So you'd find companies like insurance companies and stuff, they spend a lot of money in not necessarily charitable works, but in works of social. They try to look like they're giving back to the society around them. So they will organize the workers in the office to go and, find somebody's home who has they had a fire in the house and they need help, and they'll go and paint and fix and repair at no cost to the homeowner. All right, and then they will go buy new things for them, and those are the kind of things that you see companies getting up to. They will actively take part in beach cleanup exercises. Do you all do that here, guys? Have you ever gone on annual beach cleanup exercises, especially in the turtle nesting areas, guys? You all ever took part in those kind of things?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Which beach you
Yes,
got
sir.
in? Which beaches did you all go to?
I went to Las Cuevas and did it, but
All right.
that was the only
Right.
one I went.
Okay.
Yeah,
What up?
same one.
Same one. All right. So you all were
Yeah.
probably with the same grouping of individuals. Did you all have to weigh your collections afterwards?
No.
No, it was like some of them was doing it by bags. I
Uh huh.
believe like how much bags they bring,
Right.
and I didn't have to wear bags.
All right. Well, I did one where we did a couple of years actually for a stretch. We'd go down to Manzalina, my arrow, and do a beach cleanup, and we had to have different teams for different things. Glass was one of the things that we had to pick up a lot of. Plastics was another one that we had, and we had to bag them separately for the purpose of recycling as well. And at the end of the day, when we were finished with the exercise, we had to measure what we weigh what we collected. It was a eye-opening experience. If you ever get the opportunity to do it, go and do it. I mean, just walk with some water and make sure you have cool clothes and stuff like that, because man, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work because I mean we are generally as a people we have very little social responsibility. We don't look after our environment. When we go out there, we just toss things left, right, and center. We don't look after our environment at all. All right. Now, despite the fact that we just identified the three basic developmental principles before, the fact of the matter is that leadership is not a, color by numbers situation. We can't go through a number of steps and then find ourselves, in leadership positions or ready for leadership. It don't work like that. What we have to do is to develop really a mindset, a personal philosophy of leadership. So that's something that you're going to have to be working on throughout this course. You're going to have to constantly start to think about, if I am a leader, what would I do? How would I treat people? And what would I like in return? You know, and I always use the phrase, you don't what you want for yourself, you don't want for others. So you can't want the best for yourself, and you give everybody else the worst, and that will identify those core values that you have to develop to be able to work with others, to get to get people to want to work with you. Think about it from simple little exercises like these little group projects that you have to get involved with. Think about how you would like it done and what needs to be done in order to achieve the goal of getting your presentations ready. What do you need to do to to get the success that you're looking for, and how would you like to be treated in relation to the other people around you? You know, are you going to dismiss their calls to meet? Are you going to be flippant with your contributions, half-hearted, or would you want everybody to be paying attention and being considerate of other people's times, being understanding of the limitations that other people have because you too have limitations? What are you going to do? Those are the kind of questions that you have to develop uh, in terms of your personal philosophy to leadership. From simple things to some of the most inane things that you're going to think about. You have to already kind of develop an understanding and a developmental process for you to get to that position. Now, the paradigm, all of us know about working hard. We've been told all of our lives, if anything you want to get in life, you have to work hard for it. This model is saying, yes, we understand that we need to work hard, because the thing about it is that working hard is sort of like an old adage. What we want to do is we want to not just work harder, but we want to work smarter, because some of the things that we try to do, we're doing wrong. And when we talk about being smarter, working smarter, we're talking about collectively smarter, reflectively smarter, and spiritually smarter. So collectively smarter simply sits on the fact that all of us is smarter than one of us. Plain and simple. And that's because when you have more people involved in a decision making process, you're bringing together the training, experience, and expertise of multiple people to look at a problem. And we're not relying only on the resources available from one individual. Making sense? In the case of your chapter presentations, it's three of you all getting together to find a solution to the presentation and the teaching of that chapter to the class. If you take it upon yourself to ignore everybody else's input and potential solutions to the issues that you're likely to face, then you are not behaving in a collectively smarter manner. And that's what this smart value is: collectively smarter, reflectively smarter, taking time to make meaning out of what is happening in order to gain perspective and understanding. This has to do with taking time to reflect on past and current activities to ensure that you don't repeat errors made in the past or currently being made. And two, that you ensure that what worked is repeated, because it becomes a repeatable, or what we can do is a demonstrated type of activity. Reflection takes time and it takes effort. Unfortunately, because of the speed at which we are doing things, a lot of people and companies and organizations and individuals cannot engage effectively in reflection, because reflection requires constant effort. If you've never reflected on your life in the past, there are, I mean, um, sometimes you have a life-changing moment and you kind of reflect. But if you were in the habit of reflecting regularly, it would help you to improve what's happening in the future. It's something that all of us suffer from sometimes, but it's one of the smarter things to do. Look at what happened in the past and try to do something to change what is likely to happen in the future. All right. This is something that you could apply to your relationships, not with your significant other people, but even with your family members. Think about what was happening in the past. Why did you end up in conflict? And you know, try and work on what helps to fix that through reflection. Now, the last one has to do with being spiritually smart. And here we're not talking about any kind of religious activity. What we're talking about here is being aware of what are your core values. What are those things that you hold dear to you? Now, if you ever want to see what is the most important things to you, what are the most important principles to you, observe your behavior when things go wrong, when literally shit hits the fan. What do you do? Do you lie? Do you cheat? Do you steal when things hit the fan? Or what do you do? Examine your behavior, because those become the values that you would fall back upon and they are the cornerstone values that guide all of your actions going forward. Be aware of those values because they will be the ones that you will rely on the most. All right. So, spiritually smarter means you really need to be aware of what your core values are and not the nice ones that we hear about all the time, honesty and integrity and that type of stuff. Here we're talking about at the end of the day, the problems galore, financial issues, emotional issues, relationship issues. What do? Do you lash out at people? Do you knock people down, get violent? What are those values? What is it that you do? Examine yourself. Examine your behavior. Difficult things. All right. So that speaks to paradigms. So what is a paradigm? Paradigm is a way in which we look at things in order to make sense. Um, what is your current paradigm about leadership? What do you think about it? That's a question for you to look at and examine. All right. When we when do we need to change our paradigm or change our way of thinking? Um, that is what we refer to as a paradigm shift. A shift means that whatever was working in the past, we're not getting good results, then something needs to change dramatically in order for us to get a different result. This is sort of like the question about crime in Trinidad. We are constantly doing the same things over and over again, hoping for the same result. That's the definition of insanity. Um, Obviously, what we're doing is not working. We need a paradigm shift in the way or the approaches that we are trying to deal with criminal activities in this country, because obviously it ain't working. All right, but how do we make that paradigm shift? Well, that's a big, big question, and it's not one that this program is designed to deal with because it's not a criminal program, but it's pointing to the fact that if we are constantly getting the same results from the same set of activities that we're engaging in, then and we're hoping for something different, then we are really not looking at the problem correctly. We need to re-examine what we're doing, reflect on what's taken place in the past, see what might have worked, and that way, hopefully, things we could find a new paradigm in order to get things going. So this is a paradigm shift that the text really points us towards. Leadership is not about leaders. Yeah. Leadership is not about the leader. It's about the process of involving followership. Followership is really leadership in action among people in a group. Now, think about this. Leaders can't do anything by themselves. They require other people to work with them in order to achieve their goals. Despite how much of us think that we are an island unto ourselves, you cannot do anything in this world without people supporting you. All right, that's followership. And that's a shift in the concept that we want to look at here in terms of leadership development. Most programs focus on the actions of the one. This focus on is to flip the script, so to speak. Look at the other side of the coin. We need to focus on how we get our followership to work with us. What do we need to do? What are the kind of followers we want to get? So let's look at this here. Follower types. In this context here, I want us to think about how we behave in groups when we get group work. So here we have the relationship initiative. This has to do with public speaking, networking, that type of stuff. The performance initiative here has to do with the research, writing up the assignments and so on. All right. So where would you fall? Are you a partner? Do you perform well both in the presentation element, the networking element, as well as the research and writing area? Are you a contributor? You're not good at the presenting and the networking, but you're good at the research and writing? Or are you a subordinate? You don't like to do anything? Or are you a politician? You're real good with the talking, but you're not good with the writing. Where do you fall? Understand what I'm talking about? As a leader, categorizing followers into these kind of these vectors here allows us to partner them. So, for example, if I were a leader and I had a group of individuals and I could see, this one is a politician, one is a contributor, so on. I would partner politicians with contributors. Why? Because you get the person who's able to do the writing but unwilling to do the presenting, together with somebody who would do the representing and speaking. That makes sense? Similarly, I would partner subordinates and partners together. Why? Because the partners are high in both and they could instruct and get the subordinates to do what they need to get done in order to fill the gaps that they're requiring. So that's one system of analysis that we could utilize. This one here from Hyacinth is more for the political field. That as a leader in a political party or a political environment, you need to be looking around you at the people that are following you. You have loyalists; those are the people who are you lean heavily on. You have the sycophants who are there only because they're able to get something out of it. The critics who are only there to criticize everything you do. The opportunists who are looking for, like sycophants, but they're not as bad. They are just looking for the opportunities to make something, and it could be beneficial to everybody, both leader and themselves. Spectators, these are people just hanging around looking at things. Traitors, they just there to sell you out to other people, and of course the realists that help to keep the leader in check, because the realists will tell a leader what really happening. And loyalists tend to be a little more sheep-like, so you have to be careful with that kind of thing. So this is just a method of evaluating your followers into various types, and this allows you to develop strategies as to how to go about managing them. This is another system of looking at followership styles. So this one measures on the x-axis the degree of independent and critical thinking. So we have a 0 area here, the origin, where you have the survivor attached there or labeled there. So you have independent thinking, critical thinking people down to dependent on critical thinking, as opposed to behaviors now on the x-axis, passive behavior to active behavior. The effective follower will be those that are independent and critical thinkers who are highly active within the organization. Conformists, those are the people who they don't think, they're unable to think critically. They're highly dependent upon the guidance of the leader, but they run around, do everything that the leader says. Conformists, this is dangerous areas here. Then you have the passive follower. They don't do anything, nor do they think about anything. Um, they will just follow along, but they won't do anything. Um, the vast majority of the population of Trinidad and Tobago I have found has fallen into the alienated follower. A lot of independent, critical thinking people, but they are unwilling to participate in the actions of participating in the management of the country. Take a hands-off, almost apathetic approach to things. That's a dangerous place to be, because it means that they've resigned themselves to just giving up. Um, a good leader would identify again where these 5 areas are and try to bridge the gap between them, and try to pull them towards being more effective in their behavior. A lot of times, though, leaders prefer their followers to be in the conformist and passive follower. Um, this is sort of like the army here, the sheep, that things, and that's the dangerous thing. Again, this is for analysis purposes and, of course, creation of strategy. All right, what are the responsibilities of followers? Offer support to the leader. That goes without saying. Taking the initiative, going and do things without being asked to do so. Being a counselor and coach to both leaders and other followers. We have to remember that leaders are not going to know everything, so therefore they're going to need support and coaching in other activities that they are probably not as versed in as you might be. Raise issues and or concerns when necessary. That's something that Some leaders don't appreciate because these issues are things that might question decisions of leaders or the direction that leaders are taking, or even just the behavior of the leader. All right. Seek and encourage honest feedback. That's similar to raising concerns. Honest feedback both from the towards the leader and from the leader. Um, that is to be able to keep both people in check. Clarification of your role and expectation. Well, of course, you want to know what your role is and what you expect to be done or expect to happen. That's important as a responsibility. Show appreciation both to the leader as well as other followers. Keep the leader informed. That's important because in order for a leader to make um, proper decisions, high quality decisions, they need as much information as possible and relevant information, and not just everything that happens. We're not talking about gossip here, we're talking about informed decisions. And they also have to be able to resist the inappropriate influences of a leader. So if you have a leader is prone to encourage people to do things that they ought not to be doing, as a follower, you can resist the leader's influence to act in that manner. That's something that we want to pay attention to as well. The competencies to be able to meet those responsibilities, the ability to display loyalty. You have to be able to function well in change-oriented environments. That's a big one. Function well on teams, and in both large and small teams. Think independently and critically. That's one that a lot of leaders have problems with because independently thinking and critically thinking individuals challenge leaders because leaders have to defend why they're doing what they're doing. And of course, they consider integrity of paramount importance because they're going to hold themselves and the leader up to high levels of behavior and high standards of behavior, high ethical values. So that's those are the competencies of the follower. So that term follower, is it the best term we could use? I would suggest some other things like associates, partners. Um, can you think of anything else that you'd use? Anybody could suggest something other than a follower? Follower sound a little derogatory. No? I gave two.
Advisor.
Well, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, my advisors. Yeah, that sounds good. Anybody else?
No,
Well, I said partners before and team
no.
members. Associates, that's another term. But yes, all of those are still, you see, because if you refer to your followers as these are my people, we kind of get this thing as they belong to me kind of situation. But if I say this is my associate, it kind of puts us on a different, almost on an equal footing. All right, a partner, same similar kind of thing. We're on similar footing. All right, those are the kind of terms that we'd like to lead. We spoke before about the types of leadership styles that leaders can utilize, and this speaks to the types of leaderships based upon the circumstance that we are working in. So we said before that different types of situations calls for different types of leadership. So classical theories will involve the laissez-faire attitude or the laissez-faire approach, the autocratic approach. Well, so let's explain those for those of you who haven't done any sort of principles of management. Laissez-faire is, how it hang, it swing, whatever happens, we just leave it alone. I'm the manager in charge, but you could do what you want, kind of things like that. Autocratic is my way or the highway. You do what I say when I say, or just get out. Participative is where we include the input of everybody around us to try to come to a decision that suits the majority. That is for the common good for everybody. It's a more difficult approach to take because it's more time consuming, um, but it is probably the one of the better methods that you can utilize. Situational would be leadership that arises based upon the circumstances. You see this happening on accident sites actually. Situational leadership. People with the appropriate skills at that point in time arrive into the situation and they take charge. And once that situation has resolved itself, they then just merge back into the um, the the crowd that's there. Have you ever seen that take place, guys? I've seen it several times in at accident sites when there's an accident, somebody's injured. Um, No. I've seen it happen in classrooms where maybe a lecturer is having problems, technical difficulties with maybe a projector or a laptop and that kind of stuff, and a student who has the necessary skills steps up and takes charge. I've seen that happen in a few. That's what I'm talking about. The circumstances give an opportunity for leadership to arise given the situation. All right, those are minor situations, but at the same time, they're indicative of the situational approach. Emergent would be those people in an organization who emerge through the process of working through all the stages of the organization and emerge as a leader in the organization. We know about those kind of people. They work at all levels and then they become the manager, they become the CEO of a company, having worked through all of the aspects of the company's operation. That happens a lot. Transactional is a style of leadership where you use deals to be able to get things done. So you encourage people to do things by rewarding them or removing a reward. Right? That's a transaction. You get this done, you get this bonus. You get that done, you get this day off. That kind of that transactional approach to getting things done. Transformational is different. Transformational is a leader who has to encourage people to want to make particular types of changes to achieve certain types of goals by motivating them, but not through transactional means, but through internal motivation, meaning that they are inspiring people to want to get this job done. They want to get this done. So the transformational leadership is usually the most important type of leadership during change management situations in companies and organizations. Um, Visionary leaders or visionary leadership style is a leader that paints a picture of a very um, lofty ideal situation or vision of where we would like to be in the next 10, 15 years. It's sort of like Elon Musk keeps on talking about uh, the Mars situation that he wants to get in. That's a vision. And interestingly enough, he's gotten a lot of people involved with him to work towards that. That's what his whole SpaceX program is all about. It's eventually to achieve the vision of life on Mars. And a lot of people have bought into that already, invested into his company and so on. It's one of the reasons why he's such a rich individual. He's gotten this vision going of a world and a life beyond Earth in Mars, and people have bought into it. All right, that's a visionary leader. All right. So who's a leader? A leader is any person who actively engages with others to accomplish a change. Now, notice they're not talking about whether or not the change is positive or negative. So we're just using a broadsword here and saying all kind of change. Purpose of the leader: motivate employees. Of course, meet the goals and objectives of the organization. Ensure that the rules are adhered to both by himself and those in the organization, the followers. Provide continuity and momentum. There are times when there may be a gap between what's happening and they need to work on making sure, all right, we need to continue working this and create that momentum to keep moving the team forward. All right, that's something that's the sole function of a leader. Embrace and foster change. You can't want change for other people without, first of all, embracing and fostering that change in yourself. So, you're leading by example. You're doing things for the common good, meaning that whatever you do and however you behave, you're doing it with everybody's good in mind, not only your own. You behave in a socially responsible manner, both for in terms of the leader and the organization. We talked about this, making sure that what we do is good for everybody, including those people outside of the organization. We're not negatively impacting upon the world around us. The same thing about civic engagement and civic responsibility. We are being careful that what we do does not cause problems in the society and the civil society that operates around us. All right, so a little further things for that. We talked about this before. The social responsibility is a personal commitment, both on the part of the organization and the leadership, to the well being of the people, to the world, and to the public good. This is what we keep on talking about. Being socially responsible means we are not only looking after ourselves, but we're making sure we're doing things to ensure that everybody in and around us is benefiting from what we do. And it's not only just benefiting one group of individuals. That's a difficult thing to do sometimes. Civic engagement, a heightened sense of responsibility for all of the communities we are involved in. My work community, social community, my family, where I actually physically live, those things I have to feel a sense of responsibility. So I'm driving through my neighborhood, I see something happening, I stop and I help fix it. I see my neighbor having a problem with something, I stop and help them. Similarly, we expect that sort of reciprocal treatment from people around us. They see you having a problem, they come in and give you a hand to fix it. Same thing. You don't go and throw you don't pick up your dog shit and throw it over the wall into your neighbor yard. Always do that. Anyways, do that. And our family used to do that nonsense. It was ridiculous. All right. Or you're cleaning the drain and your drain bound with the your neighbor drain. So you pick up all the stuff stuck up in your drain and you heap it up on the at the start of your neighbor drain and block his side. Understand? And then the rain come and flood out everybody except you because you clean your drains and you're laughing at everybody else. That's not how you work at civic engagement. You make sure that what you do is to the benefit of everybody and you look out for everybody else. Something that's kind of absent in our society. So those are some of the things that we talk about in terms of making sure that we work together to make sure that our society is, you know, a better place for everybody. Social cohesion, sense of reciprocity, trust, and bonding with others. I mean, when's the last time you talked to your neighbor? Hmm. That's a tough question because we've become very isolated and self-focused, self-engaged, so that we tended to leave a lot of that out. Civic responsibility, sense of personal responsibility individuals should feel towards upholding their obligation as part of any community. What are my personal responsibilities in Trinidad? Serving in jury. These are some examples. Like going to school, obeying the law. Boy, that's a hard one. Think about how much times you've been speeding. Paying taxes. That's something I can't get away from because I don't have an income level that, well, I should say income. I get paid through government, so government automatically takes their things. But there are lots of people there, especially in private sector, who don't pay taxes. But if we have a sense of civic responsibility, then we would willingly pay those things. Actions that you can take, community service. How many of y'all have at one point in time, possibly not now because I mean your lives are picking up and a lot more busy, took part in any sort of community groups, church groups, 4-H club, the Leo club, the Lions club, the whatever clubs? No? Interesting. Oh, you voted in the last
Yes,
elections?
sir.
Mm-hmm. All right. Service in the military. Now that's something that is a little tricky with us here because in some countries you have voluntary service. We don't have those kind of mechanisms here. I know in Canada, for example, you can join the voluntary reserves for a period of time to get some military training and so on. It's that kind of thing. Any of you all here took part in things like the Scouts or the Girl Guides or cadets or anything along those lines when you were going to school? Participate like that? No? Ever had overt displays of patriotism for Trinidad?
Yes,
Flying,
sir. For
flying
CPL.
for what? I'm not talking about. that is bandwagonism. That's what that is. Only when things going good and we winning, that's when we pick up the flag and wave it all over the place, right?
No, sir. It is a constant with me.
For you, right? But
For
thank God
me.
for you. That's what you're telling me. All right. All right, but at the same time, patriotism is a constant thing. So that's what you see it a lot in American society, where um, they would um, fly the flag in front of their homes, especially those people who have members in the military and that type of stuff. They would have these special bumper stickers that they would put up. My son's in the military, or my children serve, or I have served. They'd have all these logos and stuff that indicate some degree of patriotism. It's not something that we institutionally encourage here, but I do remember in school, in secondary and primary school, we used to have to say the pledge. Y'all ever used to have to say the pledge every morning, along with morning prayers?
Yes, sir. The prayers, the
Yes,
pledge,
sir.
and the anthem.
National anthem, yeah, every morning. As a teacher, I used to have to lead. In I was teaching a secondary school. Used to have to lead my students in that thing as well. Those acts of patriotism, you know. But a lot of that has been lost in our society, and it shows itself in terms of how we behave as citizens in the thing. I mean, we litter without any sort of compunction. We just toss things over on place. So um, we basically, paint hair black every day kind of thing, according to the song. All right. So leadership and learning. Should a leader know everything? Well, I already made this statement. That is not a requirement. Leaders can't know everything simply because it's impossible, especially in our modern environment. There's no way any one leader is going to know everything they need to know at any point in time. It means, therefore, that leaders have to be required to be open to learning, especially if we understand and accept that one of us is not as smart as all of us. So that means the entire organization, including the leader or the leader in particular, needs to ensure that the environment that we create is open to learning, making mistakes, and sharing knowledge. It means that we have to share our knowledge. So nobody holds on to knowledge, because that holding on to knowledge supposedly makes you smarter, gives you more power, but it makes the hold weaker. That's what we have to understand. We also have to be open to making mistakes. Now, there's some leaders who don't allow for mistakes, but how else are we going to learn if we're not even given the opportunity to make a mistake? All right, because it's through making mistakes and errors we are able to correct and improve. I mean, think about SpaceX the other day when they crashed that rocket. There's a lot to be learned from making that expensive mistake, but again, the environment has to be open to making mistakes to be able to learn from those errors so that they don't repeat it, or they make things better, stronger. This is a learning model. Basically, it's looking at the intersection of focus, will, and capability. To be able to do things, you have to have all three of these working in tandem to be able to do things. All right, just a simple model. You all might be more familiar with this model. This is the hypothesis testing model. You conceptualize an idea, apply it, observe what takes place from the experience. You reflect upon the findings, and you either make some further critical inquiry and testing, or you send it back through the ringer to make sure that it's sort of like goes through that cycle until eventually you've proven your idea correct, and it becomes accepted into existing theory, and then it is put into application around the world, from the existing theory, or it impacts upon existing theory, all right, and changes it, which is then applied in the rest of the world. That makes sense. Most of you all should be familiar with this, especially for those from the science background, but social sciences uses a technique similar to this as well. All right. So the best organizations are those organizations that involve the concept of lifelong learning. Think about COSTAT. COSTAT is built upon this whole concept of learning is a constant in our lives. Every day you learn, and for you to stay relevant in your job, it's important that you continue to learn even after you leave any organization of training. Where when you go to work, you have to constantly keep on learning, because if you don't, you're going to get stale, and you're going to become irrelevant real fast. All right, that's something that is important. So all of the most effective organizations have learned this and try to make sure that their environments encourage constant learning all the time. Another form of learning is something called experiential learning, and that actually comes from two different methods. It can come from something we did, a concrete experience, or by thinking about something through abstract conceptualization. So the best way to see that is through this model here. We can start from either end here, from the concrete or the abstract, but we continue going through the same process. We have an experience, we reflect and we observe what took place and we reflect on it. We think about it and start to think about how we can improve it, what we could do, run the experiment. From that experiment, we have another concrete experience. That experience then leads us back into this. Or we could start from abstract conceptualization first. So we think about something, then we put it into action. We have that experience when we experiment. We reflect upon it, make some observation, and start to think about it again. All right, everybody's kind of following this. This is probably one of the most powerful ways to learn. It's from actually experiencing it. So experiential learning or learning through the experience of doing is one of the most critical ways in which we can go about expanding our knowledge base on things and engaging in active learning things. If you think about it, you want to do anything, you can't just think about it. You have to actually move it into the real world experience or the concrete experience. That's a given. And in order for us to improve upon it, we have to think about what we do and try something different to see if we get a different output. If it doesn't work that way, then you go back, think about what you're doing, and try again, and keep on going from there. So we've come to the end of this chapter here, and I have this quote here from one of the students from the text itself. Leadership is a rule open to anyone. Leadership is living by a personal set of rules in which you motivate others to do the right thing, be engaged in the world, and to listen to others and their concerns. Leadership is focused on the other person. Chandra Johnson. So she was a student who they interviewed during the process of putting this book together, and this was what she stated. And I felt that this was really a good way for us to kind of wrap this whole concept around. We've just really touched the surface of the relational leadership model. We will go into a lot more detail in the third chapter um, to be able to examine it. But it's saying something that leadership is not something that's inherently for only a few people. Everybody, in fact, this one here tells it all. Leadership is not a privilege of the few. You and I can be and should be leaders. Now, the reason why they say I can be and should be, it means that they're giving us the responsibility to take on leadership opportunities when they present themselves. All right, guys. So at this point in time, I want to, this is the citation for what we've been doing here. So I want to thank you for listening for this evening. Anybody has any questions, anything that they want to ask about at this point in time, about any aspect of the presentation that they saw? No?
It's not about the presentation, but I just wanted to clarify the time that class starts. Is it
Half
5 or
five?
5:30? Half
5:30.
5.
It's to give
Okay,
people a
thank
chance
you.
to get home and get settled before we start class. So we run from half 5 to half 8 generally. But primarily it's to give people a chance to get home and get settled because a lot of people are still kind of making their way home. All right, so I know you're looking at the 8 o'clock hour and you're wondering, well, soon stopping? Yes, okay, I did. I stopped. Okay, so no questions. Everybody's okay?
Yes, sir. Everyone's okay.
You sure about that, Miss Bassarat? You talking for everybody?
Well, I consider that nobody asking a question.
Kerry, yeah? Everybody probably going, God, this man want to shut up. Let me shut. All right, okay. Let me stop the recording and then we can pause. All right. All right.